Being a ministry wife is a vocation without a job description. And let's be honest, sometimes it seems like ministry might be easier if we did have one. If you are a ministry wife like me and are looking for hope, perspective, and a little bit of practical advice regarding your role, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Christine Hoover, author of How to Thrive as a Pastor's Wife. Welcome to the Ministry Wives Podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. Join me as we hear from women from various ministry contexts, having authentic conversations about our shared joys and challenges, even the ones we're unsure we can talk about. No topic is off limits. Today is a special episode of the Ministry Wives podcast because I'm turning the microphone over to Ben and Lynley Mandrell to interview Kyle, my husband, and me. The Mandrells live in Nashville, Tennessee, where Ben serves as the 10th president of Lifeway Christian Resources. In 2021, they launched The Glass House, a podcast hosted by Lifeway, where they have conversations with leaders who have experienced the stress of ministry. Their podcast is amazing, and you're definitely going to want to check it out. In their free time, they love exploring national parks, searching for chips and queso, and playing with their golden retrievers, Finn and Sully. And they have 4 kids, Ava, Max, Miles, and Jack. Today, Kyle and I chat with the Mandrells about my new book releasing soon, called You Are Not Forgotten, Discovering the God Who Sees the Overlooked and Disregarded. This book came out of a years-long season of unseenness for me in my marriage and in ministry. Kyle and I share about what God did in those years, what we've learned about the God who sees, and how God has changed our lives because of the truths we learned. Here, friends, is my conversation with Ben and Lynley Mandrell.
Lynley, it is really cool to be on someone else's podcast today.
Yeah, this is a huge honor.
Well, Christine and Kyle, thanks for letting us come on and be your Diane Sawyers today. We really want to probe into your inner life a little bit. I'm Ben Mandrell. I'm the president of Lifeway, and we're really excited about Christine's new book coming out in April 23rd. It releases, and it's called You Are Not Forgotten. And the content here is one of your most vulnerable books. This is what Kyle said. Kyle says this is your most vulnerable book. Would you say that's true?
I do think it's true. It is my most vulnerable book. I feel nervous about it because of that.
Well, we can't wait to ask you some really intense questions about it. Are you ready, Lynley?
I'm ready to drill you. No,
Okay.
So we wanted to take a few minutes and just Lynley and I both have some questions we want to fire at you and just get you guys talking about the book a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
So I'll go first. Christine, you start this book by a dream that you've been having over and over again for several years. Talk about that dream a little bit.
Yeah. Well, everything I'm going to talk about is in the past. It's not currently, but my husband Kyle and I went through I would say, multi-year season of struggle in a lot of different areas, marriage, ministry, and for me personally. And so the dream that I was having over and over, it almost became a joke between Kyle and I that I would have a dream where I was in the middle of a huge crowd of people, and they were all people that I knew, people from our church, our friends, and Kyle would be there. And and everyone was like super happy in the dream, but I was almost muted. I couldn't get anybody to pay attention to me. And so I would go to, and often I would feel it was like I had a need that I was trying to get somebody to listen to. And so I would go to Kyle eventually and try to get his attention. And he would always be so busy with the people around him, our church. And he was in my dream, he was often mean to me, which he's not mean to me in real life, but he was just very short, and I don't have time. And the dream would end with me crying and just trying to get someone to listen to the ache and the pain that I felt. And so I'd wake up from this dream still feeling it. And Kyle and I would joke about, he would always joke that he's the villain in all of my dreams. But it was just the same dream over and over of trying to get him and others to listen to me and to hear my need.
So you're having this dream over and over. It's not like a once or twice thing.
No, it would be pretty repetitively. And now that I think about it, I don't have the dream anymore.
Huh.
But now that I think about it, I realize there's a lot of things I realize now. But one of the things I realize now is that dream was trying to tell me something, that's how I felt in real life. because I would wake up from the dream and I would think that's so silly. I mean, it was a joke to us. But and I would and I could tell myself all the right things. I have a happy marriage. We're thriving in ministry and all of that. And so it didn't feel real to me until later on I started realizing there's a lot of truth to this dream, and it was almost like God speaking to me through it to show me that I really did feel that way in my life. I just wasn't acknowledging it.
Hmm.
Hmm. Kyle, I have a question for you. I mean, when she wakes up repeatedly with this dream, at first I'm sure it was like, okay, is there any fear after she has this dream time after time again? Like, what are you processing?
Well, I remember she'd wake up. She had dreams all the time. So she's like, I had this dream. And I'd almost brace, like, oh no, here we go again. And I would be relieved when I wasn't in a dream she had. I was like, okay, all right. I remember asking, why am I, when I'm in your dreams, why am I the bad guy? Like,
Hmm.
why am I? And so we would talk about it, but we never went further than that. But just of like, okay, well, who knows why that is, maybe we could explore that, but we never really took it any further than that of like, what is triggering this dream to happen. We just chalked it up to subconscious
Hmm.
things and moved on.
I wish you'd have called me, Kyle. I would have trained you on how to describe to her that she's being irrational and crazy. And I really am a great husband who I'm here all the time. I can give you times on the calendar I'm here. So I don't know what your problem
Kind of
is.
like, do you know how lucky I am? I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, most women would feel lucky to be married to
lucky
me.
you are. Yeah.
And yet you're making me a villain in your dreams. I would have given you those lines for free.
Yeah, and I would have thought that. I'm not sure I would. Those aren't new thoughts, but yes, I've had those as
But
well.
but Christine, really, you were saying you felt unseen in your marriage. So talk about that a little bit.
Yes. Okay, so as time went on, it became clear that the dream wasn't just a dream, that I was really feeling this in my marriage, and that's a really hard thing to acknowledge to yourself. I think especially as a pastor's wife, to say there's some dynamics here that aren't healthy and that are actually hurtful to me. And so I would say one way that I felt unseen is, and I've described this before on my podcast, where I felt that we had church planted together, and our marriage and our ministry were really on the Venn diagram. They were the same. Everything happened in our home. I was right there beside him. We did everything together. We felt a lot of purpose in that. But as the church grew and we added people on staff, we added elders, those circles rightly began to move apart. And eventually, now that I look, I can see it now and see that I I was happy for this kind of distinction to start playing out. I wanted our marriage to be separate from ministry. And so kind of I served and started a lot of ministries and then handed them off to people, and I was moving more into the marriage circle. And I would say that Kyle did not come with me into the marriage circle. He stayed in the ministry circle, and that was his primary focus. And now I can see this, that I was trying for many years to get back into the ministry circle with him, because that's how I could connect with him, because that's where he was. And I couldn't find my way back in. There were people who had replaced me, so to speak. And so there was this angst in me of how do I connect with my husband if his focal point is the church? And I couldn't figure that out. So that's
Hmm.
how I would describe it now, where I felt that I was requesting him to move with me, distinctive of the church and distinctive of ministry. And he did not receive that as an invitation. He didn't understand. I don't think he didn't do it out of he wasn't being mean, but he didn't understand the dynamic.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the dynamic at the time.
And I think I always had this like, oh, well, maybe sometime down the road, like we're adding people on because it's a growing church and that's what's normal, adding elders, adding staff people. And then I think that there was a part for me of like, well, once we get to a certain place, maybe that will look different. But I think that I was locked into some unhealthy ways and tendencies and perspectives that just kept me in the ministry realm in ways that were unhealthy.
Mhm.
And I think that's where she was like, well, I've got to interact with him, I've got to enter into that space as well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think it came to a head when I had started feeling uncomfortable about a certain woman in our church, and uh, I was saying, this doesn't feel right to me. I don't like how she's interacting with you. There's something there that makes me uncomfortable." And he didn't he didn't see it, and it became clear that I was right, and that was really what broke this dynamic open, where it felt like what I saw and what I needed was uh was just not validated or not valid. And so I think when he saw that I was right, that's when everything shifted. It was like, oh, we have a messed up dynamic here, and we need to work hard to explore this and to create a healthy dynamic of marriage and ministry.
Hmm.
It was a
Yes.
moment of deep conviction when uh, I just felt like the Lord was saying that you you think that you're the arbiter of what's right and true, and if I didn't recognize it as a legitimate problem, even though she would call out to me and say, hey, there's I just have concerns here, then I didn't take it as seriously as I ought to, because it's like, well, if there's I don't think there is a problem, and so there's no problem. Rather than her, like, seeing her and saying, like, oh, you are concerned, and therefore I'm concerned as
Hmm.
well. And so I think I operated as if I was the sole arbiter of what's right and what's wrong, what's comfortable, what's uncomfortable.
I'm always looking for the relatable in every story. And I really think a lot of folks out there who are listening are going to relate to this, because I think as a church grows, it becomes a different church. Like, no one trains you or equips you for that. We had a church planner and his wife on an episode on the Glass House, and she started out in the kids ministry, but it kind of grew to the size where she didn't want to do it anymore. But she felt stuck, because if she gives up that ministry, then she loses connection with her husband. She's not on staff anymore. She'll lose be able to keep an eye on him, like other women relating to him, like all that, like
Well,
feeling left out.
I mean, we were in the same boat. I mean, that's what our kids ministry got really large, and that's what I was doing. And it wasn't about keeping my eye on you. It was about the joy of a connected relationship. I mean, that it was fun for me to be able to interact with you and say, oh, this new family came or this situation happened, and for us to both have an idea what it was. So it had nothing
Yes.
to do for me, like keeping my eye on you.
Can I
Like,
say that better?
well, of course.
Keep an eye on you isn't the way I should have said it. I think it's really hard for a woman like you or like Christine, strong, high capacity woman, to watch another leader step in who's female interact with her husband. And there's a lot of camaraderie and fun and laughter and silly texts.
Mhm.
And you're not a part of that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really hard thing. And yet we live in a world where we're trying to find more and more ways for women to exercise leadership. So it puts us in a really vulnerable place, I think, in terms of what can happen in marriage.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly how I felt. Exactly what happened. And I think there was a good desire in that I didn't necessarily listen to, which was or I didn't connect, that I did want a seat at the table because I had a heart for ministry, and God has given me gifts for that, but I didn't have an outlet for it. And so the only thing I could do is to go to my husband, who's the pastor. And I don't know that I communicated it well always, but I don't know that he always understood that desire and that compulsion, and that I didn't have an outlet for it. And so it was hard for me to see that there were other people who got that opportunity, and I supported them. I encouraged and supported that. I was for that, but I also wanted a place.
Hey, Christine, can I ask a question for the listener out here who maybe is in the same boat? The wife feels like there's an uncomfortable relationship going on, nothing inappropriate, but just there's something in her spirit. what happened between you two to where Kyle finally really saw you and understood, okay, she's really uncomfortable with this and I need to deal with it?
I think just there were multiple incidences where I was upset, and there was the final incident where I just said, he I just think the Lord opened his eyes to
Okay.
say that he saw what I was saying, that this is not right. Something is not right. And it had to be the Spirit to say, Christine, what she's saying is valid and right.
Yeah, I think that there were you know, little incidents that we could like grab, like, okay, that was a little bit, that was a little strange, but that's nothing in and of itself. But then I think that we just looked at big picture things, and then I just felt like the conviction of the Lord is really what it came down to, of like a deep sense of repentance, even just beyond anything having to do with that, just a deep brokenness of like, I have not loved my wife well. I, into other areas of like, I've been a bad friend to other people. Like there was just this string of, brokenness and painful conversations I had to have with several people of like, hey, I've been wrong. Will you forgive me? And so it just, a 360-degree world tour of repentance, confession, and asking for forgiveness
Hmm.
happened.
So, Kyle, what have you learned about including your wife when she feels left out? And I'm asking for a friend.
I I think that before I did spend a lot of time when she would say something, I'd be like, well, I can't help you with that, or I'll try to help you, but that's just maybe something you have to endure, or maybe you're crazy for thinking about that, or too emotional, or those kinds of things. But I
He
think,
didn't say that, but he thought that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, functionally, it's like I can't fix that, and so you need to let that die. But I think a deep sense of accepting what your spouse is saying and really processing that where they're at. And then I think fighting like crazy to dream and imagine and work towards that of like, my wife walks with the Lord. She loves Jesus and wants to serve in different ways. And I just thought through, rather than thinking through, what could this be a new season for us? And what does it look like to walk with the Lord in that? I was like, well, I just don't know how we can do it. And I left it at that. I didn't think through what creative, proactive, intentional things we could do and explore. So I would just do that rather than just like, well, dead end street. Like, how do
It
we?
is what it is. That doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. So I think those are the things I would do. We didn't spend half as much time thinking, talking, and praying as we should have. And I think those are some steps that we've missed out as well. That were just, she probably felt very unloved in the midst of that. Of like, we would have these conversations and they would go nowhere. And so I think we could have done a lot better job of that.
But I also could have done a better job of knowing what it is I was requesting. I think I would just feel it, and I would be emotional, and I was getting to a point where I was desperate. And so it probably came out as desperation. I just feel like I'm getting buried here. I just feel like I'm sinking and nobody sees it. And so but I wish that I had been more requesting something specific to think through, this is what I would like. How can we make this happen? Rather than just like, that's more what it was.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, let's try to dovetail back into the book a little bit then, because this is all great background for a book about not being seen. Christine, yeah, after you describe your feeling of not being seen, you have a chapter entitled Hiding,
Mhm.
where you describe you realizing you were contributing to your own unseenness and you had some patterns you needed to change. Like what were some of those realizations?
Mhm. Yeah, that was hard for me to at first I was just angry at Kyle, and it was really hard for me to uh, to acknowledge that I had contributed to the dynamic that we had. And one way is what I just described, that I felt this deep unsettledness, but I didn't ask for something specific. I didn't think through, what can I do? I looked to my husband to solve it and to fix it for me. And so I wish that I had, and when I say that that's hiding, it was, I was afraid to say what I really wanted. I felt like I had to keep my preferences and my, even, in some of that I had learned, and some, as we've just described, it was sometimes met with, it wasn't met well. And so I hid some of my true desires and preferences, that I wish that I had been more vocal about. And I don't mean fighting for it, but I just mean being specific in what I was requesting. I talked myself out of things, that I shouldn't feel uncomfortable about this woman. I want to think the best of her. But I learned through all of this that even the dream, that to pay attention to how I feel, and that if I feel unsettled about something over a long period of time, there's a reason. And it may not be someone else, it may be me, but God is wanting to he's wanting to show me something in that. And so those are the things I just felt like I hid myself away and just waited for other people to see me and to pull me out of that pit and to help me find a place, rather than doing what felt vulnerable to me, which is to say, this is what I would like. And in the end, as we're learning and growing together, Kyle and I did have some of those conversations, and they didn't go well, not with him, but with people who in the church that could have helped me. And so it almost confirmed my fear of asking, but I'm glad that I did that anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Your guys' kids are about the same age as ours, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
I wonder, I'm just sitting here processing this. Like Lindley and I have felt like in these when we're raising teenagers, this has been the hardest season for us to trust each other.
Hmm.
I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because we have constant disagreements about parenting or.
I wouldn't say constant. Feels like an exaggeration,
Well, I
but
mean,
a few.
that can be as simple as he can have the ice cream bar. No, he can't. I mean, I'm not saying there's like major blowups, but I'm like, when you have kids who are constantly asking for permission for things, there's normally dad's answer and mom's answer.
Mhm.
So it puts us at odds a lot. We have to work. Our communication gets strained. And I feel like no one prepared us for this season of just marital. It's taken a lot more work
Yeah.
to stay on the same page. So I also wonder if, as all this is going on in Kyle's life and the situation, if there's also like, have you guys felt like the season of life's been harder? Because you said multi-year struggle.
I think this all was happening prior to COVID, into COVID, out of COVID. So that was part of what was going on for Kyle as a pastor, was he was dealing with COVID
Oh yeah,
and all of that. And so I was just trying to keep our family afloat
yeah.
and keep him afloat.
So you felt selfish saying anything?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, look what
Like,
all the stress he's carrying. I don't want to add
yeah.
one more pound.
Hmm. So it
Yeah,
was a years long season. Go ahead, Kyle.
I think I was slowly imploding, through the stress and the pressure of things. I think just, I was starting to crack from all things. But yeah, I think certainly seasons where she wasn't having those desires and maybe those feelings on the same way when the kids were little. She was like, I am primarily at home, and then but when the kids' needs were changing, and she was like wanting to engage in things, being like, oh, there's no place here
Mhm.
now. Like, it's all the seats on the bus have been taken. And so I think that there's been seasons of life change, but also like I was certainly, in an increasingly challenging place.
Hmm. Christine, I've heard you say now a couple of times as you've been talking, we're constantly learning and growing. You said learning and growing quite a few times. One thing that I'm doing on the Glass House is interviewing some pastors' wives of like lessons they've learned through the decades, like in their 20s, 30s, 40s kind of thing. Like during all of this, what was a lesson that you feel like God was strongly teaching you during this time?
A lot of things. A lot of things. I mean, I feel like we're different people
Mm.
than when this started. We've moved our whole family as a result of these things and taken on new roles as a result. But I think the main thing I learned was that God really does see me. And that's why I wrote this book and these truths are holding me now as we're going through a whole different season of suffering. I I have not doubted God in our current suffering because I know what he did for me when I felt so buried. He saw me and he pulled me out. You know, I think about Psalm 40 that I was in a pit and he pulled me out and he gave me a new song. And there were things that I learned. It wasn't just that he saw me, but I learned specific things about how he saw me, that he advocated for me by bringing this conviction to Kyle. You know, that's not something I could convince him of. I had tried to get him to listen to what I was saying, but the Lord advocated for me by convicting Kyle. He, through all of that, was refining what it is that I actually was called to do, and what he was almost like, I would sometimes describe it as he was creating a bigger desire and I was running into a brick wall. And I couldn't always understand why he was doing that, but I think he was showing me what it is that I really was called to do, and he was making a way for me to be able to do that. But I needed those years. I really did need those years to be humbled and to walk intimately with him when I felt like I didn't have anybody else.
Hmm.
And so those truths are still holding me. They've changed me. And that's why I wanted to write the book.
And I've got a few answers about how I've seen what all we've walked through impact and change her as well. I think that Christine has really grown in a sense of confidence, of knowing, hey, this is okay, this is not okay. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to be specific. I think that she is like, no, I I know what I know. I know what I believe. I know what ought to happen. And then I think really a heightened sense and a confidence in her gift of discernment, I think has really kind of blossomed, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to doubt that. Like that's been proved right over and over. So I'm going to lean into that rather than just write that off.
So I'm trying to think for pastors and wives who are out there listening, I'm trying to imagine the scenarios they're in where maybe ministry has changed. Their marriage feels different because they used to a season of joy and abundance, and now they're in a tough season. Like, what would you say to those couples out there in ministry who they're going through a multi-year struggle?
I'm sorry first. It's very, very hard. It's very painful because this is something that I realized in that time was that I needed a pastor, and I didn't have a pastor because my pastor was my husband. And for many years that was a huge gift to me. But when we were struggling, that wasn't a gift to me, and I needed someone to pastor me. And so that can be really hard. You feel alone. It's like you feel alone, and then you even feel more alone because you don't, who do you go to with that? Um, but I would say one thing that I learned in that time was that I often thought about ministry as outside of my home, meaning other people that are not in my family. I mean, I thought of my kids as part of my ministry, but I rarely thought about Kyle as my ministry. And we just did not carve out time for one another. We spent time together, but I didn't, there was a missing deep connection that we didn't know we were missing necessarily. But I look back now and I see it, that we were giving of ourselves to everyone else except for one another. And we had to carve out some extensive time to work through these things and to come back together. And I would say we haven't just come back together, but we have a new marriage and a healthier marriage, a happier marriage. And I would have said we were happy before. So I'm thankful the Lord is increasing our joy. But I just think I would say to those couples to it's worth it to carve out time for counseling, time for going away together, and really having these kinds of conversations where you're honest with each other about where you're at and when committed to working together.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think that, as a pastor, you'll go on strategic planning retreats, or you'll have some dedicated time, whether it's in triage mode or intentional time with parenting, those kinds of conversations you'll have of like, okay, let's look at this. Let's look closely. What's going well? What's not? What are the repetitive themes that we see? But I think in marriage, you can just keep going in cruise control, and so I think that having those moments, having those times of like dedicated work towards, what are those repeated conflict points that we have? What are the things that keep popping up? Who do we want to be as a married couple moving into the future? Where are our blind spots? Those kinds of things of being intentional with our time and energy to realize that our marriage needs that kind of attention as well.
Christine, I have a question for you. I just, as someone who's prepared a lot of content, mostly for preaching, it always helps me when I have somebody in mind that I'm going to speak this sermon to. I can picture the person, their need, why this passage is going to connect with them. As you were writing this book, who did you have in mind? Who's
That's
the
a
ideal reader?
good question. Well, in the book, I describe categories of unseeness. And so that could be somebody who's faced a sense of injustice, that somebody's wronged them and they haven't been able to make it right. There's pain in that, and you feel alone in that. Could be your circumstances are that one that where people struggle to understand or to relate to you, and so you feel alone in it. It could be someone like me who I have these desires and I have these gifts, I think, and I want to be able to use them, but I'm running into a brick wall over and over, and I just don't know that there's a place for me. And I think anybody who is in pain and suffering because they feel perhaps God has forgotten me too. And that is something in the book I go on the questions I was asking at the time. Where are you, God? Do you see what's happening to me, God? I think those are the kinds of questions that not only we ask, but we see in scripture. I know, I don't just think I know. Those questions are all over scripture of people asking those questions. And so I think we all at some level feel alone at different parts of our lives. But I wrote this for women who are really struggling. They're in a painful circumstance and they don't quite know how to get out of it or what to do in response. I want them to know that God sees them and he acts for them. He doesn't just see, but he acts in certain ways for them. And he may call them to obey him in ways that feel, like I said, feel vulnerable, to put ourselves out there in some way. But we have to make a change sometimes in order uh, to kind of come out of that pit.
I think this is really hard because when a pastor's wife feels particularly confident in an area, um, it's really hard because if the pastor affirms that, then there's always some sort of judgment out there of like, oh, well, the pastor is just doing that because it's his wife. And the reason I think of that is because if you ask any woman, like, I don't fit the typical mold of a pastor's wife, she's going to say, I don't sing or I don't play the piano.
Mm-hmm.
And what is funny to me about that now, or ironic, is that if a woman did sing or play the piano at this point, at this day and age, I feel like she would not be allowed to do that because it would be seen as like nepotism or he's choosing her over other people. Or so it is like an injustice. You talked about injustice. Like, even if you are really talented as a pastor's wife, it's a hard battle to
It
be able
is.
to use your gift at your husband's church because people are always going to say, or more than likely going to say, like, well, there's a reason that she's on stage, or she's not the most talented, or whatever. It's a jealousy. It's hard. Like you were talking about how women, like pastors' wives, are vulnerable to that earlier. I don't know where you're going with that exactly,
Well,
but
I just think it's a tough spot because, to Christine's point, it's really healthy when marriage and ministry are two separate things in a way. Because ministry is always doing this, and you don't want your marriage to ride the roller coaster of, church is up, church is down, whatever. But at the same time, it's a partnership. So it's like we can't have both, but we want both. And I think even 23 years in, we're still trying to figure out, like, what does enough partnership look like where we're connected, but we also have autonomy and our
Mhm.
individual expression.
Mhm.
uh, it's taking us a long time to figure that out, and I don't know that we'll ever fully get there.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But I agree with what you said, Christine. I think the tendency is to just withdraw and keep our needs inside, and then that gets really
Yeah.
unhealthy,
Yeah.
I think it's really healthy.
really
Yeah.
unhealthy. It's really healthy.
Well, and I think I've seen growth and change in Kyle, and the way he's related to me in this is he genuinely wants good for me, and he did before, but he champions that, and he encourages that, and we have made a move because of that. So that he took a different pastoral role where he's not the lead pastor, so that I also could take a role at a church, at the same church. And I know that not every pastor's wife wants that, but that was becoming more and more what I wanted, and I knew that we couldn't have it in the church where we were. And so he has not only supported me and encouraged me to use my gifts, but he has put feet to that and changed his role for my sake. And that's really been a blessing to me. It's opened up a whole new world for me. And I think for him too. I just think that there's more of a partnership, as you said, Ben, where I'm supporting him and encouraging him into what he's doing, and he's doing the same for me.
So was that really kind of the root of why you guys decided to make a little bit of a change?
Kyle, do you want to go?
It was certainly a key component. I
Yeah.
think that there was an openness to leave for a while that we knew and expressed, but we weren't actively trying to leave. We were reached out to by the church here, but we were trying to think through intentionally what are some new ways and rhythms of doing ministry together where we were. And so I think that was a driving factor for us. And then when the church called and they're like, actually, we want to hire you both. And we're like, well, really? Okay. So we took that pretty seriously, but it was by all means a factor. That was a very appealing dynamic
So did you
in
start at
what
the
they
same
talked to.
time?
No, they hired Kyle first. So, I mean, that was a little bit hard for me. Not that I didn't get hired at the same time, but there was not a guarantee for
Mm.
me. And so we moved it for him to take the job, but it was a few months later than when I started, as after he did. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
So here's my last question, Christine. If you could just share one of your favorite moments of the book where you're just like, "Ah, I really loved writing that part. Like, it was really helpful just to write it out." What part would you allude to? A story, a passage of scripture that really sticks out?
Well, I use the story of Hagar a lot at the beginning as the jumping off point because she was the woman who named God, the God who sees. And so I love just kind of digging into her story. But my favorite thing to write was the end. I just described where we used to live, there was a tunnel, a train tunnel that the city made into a walking tunnel, and it's a mile long. And so you walk in at the beginning and you can see the sun behind you, but once you get in further, you can't see anything. You have to have a headlamp or your phone to light the way. And then you come out. I mean, I remember the first time I went in, I was like, I kind of got scared because you're in the middle, you know that the light is somewhere half a mile away, and then you finally come out to the other side. And I use that as an analogy of what I've walked through. Um, and I love just thinking back to using that analogy and writing that out of when I went into the tunnel, I didn't know I was going into the tunnel. The Lord took me into the tunnel for a reason, and he brought me out on the other side a changed person. And he has given me such a confidence in him through that. And so I just loved writing that. It's one of the last chapters, just reflecting on, yes, I felt unseen for a long time, but I don't feel unseen anymore. And it's not because Kyle's changed or I've changed necessarily. It's because I know God in a new way. And that's something that has just given me such a solid footing to go forward on.
Larry Crabb wrote a book called Shattered Dreams. It's a really impactful book about what do you do when your whole dream just gets squashed. And it's really insightful in that he says, sometimes God has to shatter the dream we have so he can get us a better dream.
Yes.
And it sounds like your guys' story would just be an illustration in his book of you were really wanting something in your current context, but it took pain and suffering to get you to this place where you're experiencing increased joy.
That's exactly.
That's right.
Well, what else do you guys want to say? We've asked you all the questions we had in mind. Anything else you want to throw in there?
Oh, no, I think it's good. But I wondered if y'all have anything you would resonate with what we've shared in your own. I mean, you've talked to little snippets, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, your story isn't all relatable to us. The transition's been so smooth.
Yeah, I actually feel like we're just barely coming out of an unseen phase here. I feel more unseen now, currently in our context with Ben being at Lifeway than when we were at the church. The church felt to me very much like he and I had a ministry together, and um, we really worked pretty well there together. I mean, we got into fights, of course, and those sort of things like in staff meeting, which was always awkward. But you know,
Oh, come on. It wasn't a fight. It was just a disagreement.
just a little disagreement, little tiff.
It was a debate.
So it's more, I mean, this book for me, I mean, I kind of dove right in, Christine, of just the unseenness, because there are gifts that I feel like I have that are not of any value at Lifeway, or
Mm.
people don't see them because they don't. At a church, people like you're in and out every Sunday and people can see where your gifts are and your personality. But here I pop in and out a couple times a month. It's not their job, it's not their duty to know like what my gifting is. And so they can't possibly understand how I could help connect at Lifeway kind of thing. So it's been more of a battle here, but um, having my own role now at a different company has been fun and special. But one of the things that's hard there is that we don't have any paths that cross.
Yeah.
And so, like when I tell him, like, "Oh, I'm working with a church in LA," he's like, "That's great," and then it sits there, kind of like, what do I say? So, I mean, I think we're more in your battle now
Mm.
ever. But the thing that God has been teaching me so much lately, especially as our kids get older, is just like I literally keep telling people I hear God saying to me all the time, "Take it to the Lord in prayer." Like I sing it to myself, and I just every battle I have, I'm just constantly praying about. Because I've tried so hard for so many years to fix it on my own. That's my go-to. Like I
Yeah.
love to be in control. And now I'm learning as my kids get older, I'm not in control. And so I'm just taking it to the Lord in prayer. And I do think that's helped our marriage. So whereas we're not out of this unseen space, our marriage is stronger than it has been in a long time because we're just trying to give it to the Lord, trying to learn to be encouraging to each other where we can.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of sarcasm. That has been a tone in our marriage for a lot of years, is just using sarcasm to cope. What's your thought? That was a lot of words.
That was good. I liked what you said there. One way I like to talk about this is in the past, we've always heard about your life being hills and valleys. You have ups and downs, and God's with you in both. But someone shared with me years ago that life is more like a set of train tracks where there's always a track of joy and there's always a track of pain.
Hmm.
And maturity is learning to understand that. I feel like Lynley and I have really grown in that, in that there is no utopia out there in ministry where we're finally going to arrive where we both feel totally fulfilled and all is well.
Yeah.
There's things about leading Lifeway that I absolutely love. I've had a great day today, had great meetings. I love the people I work with. I love getting to travel and see different churches. Like there's so much I love. And yet there's always going to be a little bit of an ache for me. just because I was a pastor for 17 years and being really close to people and meeting their spouse and their children and just hanging out after church on Sunday. Like there's just something with that you can't get in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's also a connection between us. Like it's awkward for us to be like just in a Sunday school class. We are, but I'm used to being the teacher and she's used to being the one that plans all the events.
Mm.
And so even just figuring out how to be good church members
Yeah.
is hard.
Yeah.
So I think we're maturing to the point where we're beginning to understand in every season there's things that you just have to suffer through. And what is God really
Mhm.
teaching you through that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think we've learned to listen to the pain. What is the pain telling you, and connecting over that, it coming
Absolutely.
together and letting that be a connection point versus it's me or it's you, or it's my thing or it's your thing. Let's connect over that. What were you going to say, Kyle?
Yeah, I think it's just in different roles in different seasons. It's at some level you're trading different challenges.
Yeah.
Like even Christine, like she's all right. She's got a role here at the church now, and she loves it and is thriving, and she's crushing it, and she's super busy and stressed. So it's like
Yes.
waking up at 5 a.m. She's not having those dreams anymore. She's just having a harder time sleeping. So,
That's true.
I understand.
Yeah.
so
There's a new set of
that is,
challenges that you
Yeah.
have to embrace. Like
Yeah.
through many trials and tribulations, we enter the kingdom of God. It's always there.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I would say one of the struggles that I feel like Lynley and I have grown in is learning how to let the other one just have the feeling and not try to talk them out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Lynley and I think when she's weak, I want to be strong. When I'm weak, she wants to be strong. And that can sometimes counteract connection.
Yep.
Because there's moments where I just want her to be really mad with me or sad with me. There's moments where she wants the same.
Christine, here's a story of growth. Recently, he came home and he told me something, and my tendency is to be like, "Have you lost your mind?" or whatever. And he told me, and I like, of course, I see a therapist some, and I said, "Thanks for telling me," and I was so proud of myself because I just said, thanks for sharing that with me," instead of like fixing it or here's what you should do, because that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I mean, that's a little story of growth.
it was also awkward in that moment for me to say, "You're welcome."
You're welcome.
That is funny because that's exactly what Kyle says now. Because before he'd talk me out of it and he'll say, "Thank you for sharing." It is kind of funny, but he says it all the
Yeah.
time. Thanks for
It's one of
sharing.
the hardest things to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so proud of myself though, because I was thinking of all these things and I thought, just calm down and just say thanks for sharing.
I have noticed you trying much harder at that.
Thank you.
And it's challenged me to try harder.
I'm glad.
Thank you. You're welcome.
thanks for sharing.
Thanks for sharing, you guys.
Okay.
Well, we always love talking to you guys. It always gets real.
Well, we love talking to y'all too. Thanks so much for being willing to come on and interview us for my podcast.
I
We
can't
love
wait
it.
for your book
Yeah.
to come out. Thanks for partnering with Lifeway. April 23rd, I better get my copy.
We're
That's all I'm
excited about
saying.
these books.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for listening to the Ministry Wives podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. If you found this content helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcast platform or share it with a friend. You can find this podcast and other helpful resources at ministrywivespodcast.com.